So after I told my parents that I'd become a Muslim, I remember feeling a sense of relief. I felt happy that I didn't have to hide it anymore, that I could go out to the mosque and I didn't have to make excuses as to where I was going. I felt really happy that I'd let them know, but I knew that they were not happy. I mean, I could see it in their eyes whenever we spoke with each other, whenever they saw me. There was a look of disappointment, but also a look of fear, you know? At that time, when I embraced Islam, the picture of Islam on the television, on the news, was really, really bad. All you ever used to see about Muslims was terrorism, hijacking of planes. I remember seeing people in Iran beating themselves, blood going everywhere. The images are still in my mind. I remember the picture of Islam was terrible. So of course, naturally, people fear what they don't know. And my mother and my father and my sister, they were all scared. They were all worried. What's going to happen to him? What's he going to become? Anyway, in the months that followed, things got quite difficult. They got quite tense. I remember one of the things that was, until now, amazes me is that as a Muslim, whenever we want to pray, we have to make ablution first. We have to, in Arabic called wudu, we have to wash our hands, our mouth, our nose, our ears. We wipe over our hair, our feet. We make ourselves clean and pure before we pray. And in Islam, there are 5 prayers. And the first prayer, the morning prayer, back in the UK, sometimes it would be really early. Sometimes it would be 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning. And when I used to get up to make wudu, to go to the bathroom to make wudu, my father would always get woken up. And I don't know, it didn't matter how quiet I was, he'd always get woken up. And so that would make him angry. And that would make him angry that I had, more angry or more disappointed that I'd become a Muslim. So what I started to do was, before going to sleep, I'd take a bowl of water and I'd keep it in my bedroom. So when I woke up, instead of going to the mosque, which definitely, was waking everybody up, so I didn't do that. So there was no going to the mosque. I was praying in my house. But going to the bathroom to make wudu, to make ablution before prayer, would always wake him up. So I said, okay, look, I don't want to make them upset. I don't want to make them angry. So I'll take this bowl of water and I'll make ablution, I'll make wudu in my bedroom, when it's time to pray. That way there'll be no noise. Well, I don't know if it was shaitan, if it was the devil waking my father up to make him angry with me, but even when I would make wudu in my bedroom really quietly, I remember just really, really, really quietly making wudu. I remember praying, and I remember my head being on the floor, and my father opening the door, and I remember it hitting my head. And I was thinking, how is he waking up? I've been so quiet. And he'd get really upset and really angry. Oh, you disturbed my sleep. You can't keep doing this. I was thinking to myself, I used to go out to nightclubs. I used to go to parties. I'd come in, 3 in the morning, drunk. Nobody really complained then, but here I was trying to pray. And somehow it became this big thing. As I say, who knows if it was shaitan? Who knows if it was the devil? Just whispering to upset my parents more and more. So things were not easy. Things were tense. And I used to talk to an amazing man during the day who worked in a mosque in London called Regent's Park Masjid, Central Park Mosque. And this brother called Mahmoud was and is one of the most amazing people that I've ever met. And Mahmoud would talk to me and help me with Islam. He'd explain to me, you're a new Muslim, you need to take it easy, don't take on too much. And he was a great, great help. And he also started to prepare me for the possibility that my mother and father might at some point get really upset with me and ask me to leave. And, he prepared me for that. So I was reading every day, trying to learn more about my religion, and things were okay, but they were still tense at home. One night we went out for dinner. We went out to a really nice restaurant. I can't remember which restaurant it was, but I think I must have been about 18 and a half, must have been about 18 and a half years old. And they took me out for dinner, my mother, my father, and my sister. And we had a nice meal. Things were a bit tense because I'd started to grow my beard. I mean, it wasn't as long as it is now. But, you know, the relationship was probably the most difficult that it had ever been. I was always so close to my mother, my father, my sister. And, you know, the past few months, things were not good. Anyway, we went out for a really nice meal. And when we finished the meal, my father said to me, listen, you've decided to become a Muslim. And that's fine. That's your choice. But I want you to know that this can't continue in my house. I was thinking, wait, what's going on here? And I was thinking, is this what Mahmoud was telling me might be happening? They might get so sick of me, they ask me to leave? He said to me, listen, you can be a Muslim, you can pray, you can do whatever you want, but not in my house. I said, Dad, what do you mean? He said, you have a choice. Come home with us tonight. We'll go back to things the way they were. You can be a Muslim, but you can't pray in my house. Simple as that. Or you can choose to be a Muslim, but you're going to have to pray somewhere else. But there'll be no praying in my house. I can't take it anymore. He said, you wake me up every morning. I'm not having it. You make the choice. Either stay or don't stay. But if you stay, you cannot pray in my home. I was shocked. I couldn't believe that we just had this lovely meal and now my family, my mum, my dad, my sister were sitting in front of me and this was being said to me. You know, like those situations where you think, wait, this can't be happening. I want it to stop. But it wouldn't stop. It was there. And I'll never forget what I said. And maybe it was because I was almost half expecting it to happen at some point. I said, Dad, Mum, Jenny, I said, I love you so much. But because I love you, I have to love the one that created you more. And the one that created you and the one that created me has told me that I have to pray 5 times a day. So even though I love you, I have to love the Creator more. And I can't say to you, I'm not going to pray. I can't do that. And if you say to me, that means I have to leave, then I have to leave. But I don't want to leave. Believe me, I don't want to leave. Dad said, then now, as far as I'm concerned, I don't have a son. I don't have a son. And they got up and they left the restaurant. Fortunately, they paid the bill, because otherwise I would have been in real trouble. But yeah, they left the restaurant and drove off and went home. And I had nothing with me. I had no money. My car was at home. I had nothing. And we were, I think the restaurant maybe was in St. John's Wood, so I wasn't too far away from Regent's Park Mosque. I didn't know what to do. I think it was about 10 p.m. I had nowhere to go. I didn't have any friends. I don't think I had a mobile phone in those days. Or maybe I had a phone. I don't remember, but all I know is I had nowhere to go and nobody to speak to. So I went to the only place that I knew would be open early in the morning, which was Regent's Park Mosque. So I walked to the mosque. I remember walking so slowly. I was very upset. And I waited outside Regent's Park Mosque until it opened at about 3 o'clock in the morning for the morning prayer. The same prayer that would make my father so upset. I waited there, I guess, for about 4 or 5 hours. I waited for them to open up. I went in and I prayed, and then I stayed there. And I stayed there until 7 in the morning when Mahmoud arrived, the person that I would speak to. And I told him, I said, Mahmoud, what we thought would happen, it happened last night. Mahmoud was amazing. Mahmoud spoke to some people, and there was a small mosque that was just opening in Edgware Road. And this mosque needed somebody to work there, to open the doors for the morning prayer, and to lock it up and close it after the evening prayer. So Mahmoud spoke to the people there, and they said that I could stay there. I could, they would let me live there, and there's food there. They would let me live there as long as I opened the mosque each morning and closed it at night. So the night, that night I got kicked out of my house, and then by the next day I was living in a mosque in Edgware Road. And that's what I did for about 6 months. I worked less than 6 months, maybe three or 4 months. I worked in that. It was a tiny building. It was a small house, and I worked there, opening the doors and closing the doors. And I would spend my days reading, studying. They had some books in English about Islam, some books of Hadith, Bukhari, Muslim, and I would that was my life. I went from living in real luxury, real luxury in Chelsea, Putney Bridge. That's where we lived before they moved to Chelsea. So I went from living in real luxury, going out for dinner, having to choose between Islam and my parents, and I chose Islam, finding myself homeless, but then getting a job in a mosque. And I used that time to study and learn more about Islam and for my faith to increase. And during that time, I would try to contact my mum. I would try to contact my dad. They wouldn't have anything to do with me. I remember one time I went round to see my mum, and I remember she was cleaning, and I knocked on the door, came in, she was cleaning. I said, "Mum, can I borrow some money to get some soap? I don't have anything." And I remember there was 1 penny on the floor. I'll never forget, there was a penny on the floor. Like 1 penny's like 1 cent, like halala in Saudi. And I remember she picked up the penny and she said, "Here, take this, that's all you're getting." So things were really, really bad for quite a while. After about 6 months of living in this mosque, with no money, no nothing, somehow, I think I contacted my mum, or she contacted me. Maybe her heart became soft and she wanted to speak to me. And so she contacted me, or I contacted her. I can't remember, it was so long ago, and I don't want to say something that's not right. So somehow we got talking again, and my mum said, "Look, I'll speak to your father for you. I'll try and do what I can to bring you and your father back together again." And so that I guess is the spark that started the relationship moving again with my family. After about 6 months of living in that mosque, so I was at that point, I guess I just turned 19. I used to go to Regent's Park Mosque at the weekends and sometimes during the day. And Mahmoud came and spoke to me one day, and he said, "Look, there's a young lady. She's similar to you. She's become Muslim. She embraced Islam. She became a Muslim, and her family have rejected her. And she's been a Muslim for a few months. You've been a Muslim for about a year. She would like, she needs to get married. You need to get married. So would you like to meet each other?" I said, "Well, yeah, of course. That makes total sense. That makes total sense. Let's do that." And we did that, and we met. After a couple of years, my first son was born, and I remember looking at the sky in London, and it was grey, and it was gloomy, and it was raining, and I remember thinking, this is really, I don't feel so happy here. I don't feel so happy here. And there was good reason why I didn't feel so happy here. London was not a particularly happy place to be as a new Muslim. People were not used to seeing British Muslims, Western Muslims. I mean, today things are very different. But back then, people didn't know what you were. People really didn't understand what you were. People were not as educated maybe as they are today on what Muslims are, and they just think you're crazy. So I had a lot of problems, a lot of violence, a lot of difficult situations. I remember looking at the sky. I was in Ladbroke Grove, and I looked at the sky, grey sky, and I said, "There's got to be there's got to be something better than this. There's got to be something that would make me happier than that. I want to see blue skies. So I spoke to my wife. I said, you know what, babes? Let's just take a break. Let's start by just taking a break. We haven't even had a holiday since we've been married. Let's just take a break. Okay, what should we do? So I had a friend, Canadian friend, and he was living in Morocco. I knew that he was living in Morocco, and he'd married a lady in Morocco, and he was really happy. He used to send me messages and tell me how amazing he was, how happy he was over there in Marrakesh in Morocco. I said, why don't I go and visit him? If it's what he says it is, let's go there for a bit. Let's just pick up and go. She said, let's do it. I went out there. I got out there. I couldn't believe how nice the life was. Marrakesh was beautiful. There was none of the hustle and bustle of London. There was none of the anger, none of the fighting, none of the problems that I'd experienced in London. There was just happiness. And you could live there for relatively cheap. So I called my wife. I said, it's just what he said it was. And we made the decision to move to Morocco. And I, every few months, would go back to the UK, drive a taxi, make enough money to live for another 3 months and go back. And that's what we did. And we did that for about nine months. The reality was that life wasn't sustainable. I couldn't keep leaving my family, going back to the UK, doing taxi work, going back. It wasn't sustainable. So I thought to myself, how about I try and get a job? Maybe I can get a job here teaching English. Why not, right? Why not? I can speak English. Everybody in the village was asking me, can I teach English? Can I teach English? Why not? I'll give it a go. So I bought a grammar book. I remember it was an English Grammar in Use by Raymond Murphy out in Marrakesh. I bought this big purple book. And I said, okay, I'll be an English teacher. And I had my first class. And a couple of people came to my class. And I was the only English teacher there at that time. The only one. Shortly after that, everybody started doing it. I was the only one from amongst the people in Marrakesh, the Westerners in Marrakesh at that time. And I was so bad that they didn't come back after the first lesson. I had no idea what I was doing. I remember that they asked me, what's the difference between this tense and that tense? And I thought to myself, oh my God, I have no idea. I don't know. I've never even asked myself that. I don't know grammar. I just know how to speak. And so I said, okay, this isn't going to work. This really isn't going to work. I need to get trained. I need to get qualified. I decided then to start applying for jobs outside of Morocco. Anywhere that I could find that I thought was similar to Morocco, where I can teach English, I'll do it. So teaching English in the traditional sense just wasn't going to happen for me. I remember one day I was in an internet cafe, and somehow, maybe because we didn't have Google in those days, I think it was Ask Jeeves. Somehow, anyway, something attracted my eye to a website called TEFL.com. And TEFL.com, when I went on it, they were advertising teaching jobs in Oman, in Abu Dhabi, I remember, in Saudi Arabia. I said, oh, Saudi Arabia. Wow, Saudi. I went to Saudi once for Hajj, the pilgrimage. Wow, imagine teaching in Saudi. So I started looking at all the jobs. I was like, oh my God, there's nothing here that I can do. I don't know the difference between a verb and a violin. I really, at that point, I didn't know what I was doing. I really didn't. And then I saw a job that said, Saudi Arabia, conversation teacher. Conversation teacher? You mean speaking English? Sign me up. So I applied for the job. I remember I wrote to the guy called I think it was Dr. James, and I said to him, Dr. James, let me start by telling you I don't have any of the qualifications or the experience that you're looking for. And you've probably turned off your computer and walked away. But just in case you're still looking at your computer screen, let me tell you something about me and why I think I can be good for you. And then I started rambling for 2 pages on why I thought I'd be a good conversation teacher. I sent off the application. I ran back home to my wife. I said, babe, I've applied for a job in Saudi Arabia teaching English as a conversation teacher. She said, you're crazy. Who's going to hire you? I said, no, come on. Let's pray for it. And the next day when I went back to the internet cafe, I clicked on my emails, nothing. I went back the next day, nothing. Went back the next day, nothing. And then on the fourth day, nothing. Fifth day, sixth day, seventh day, nothing. After about 20 days of checking, I gave up. I forgot about it. I said my wife was right. Until 2 months after that. 2 months after that, well, you know what? I'm going to stop there and I'll leave it for part 4. Part 4, I'll explain how I ended up in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. You might want to share it with somebody who you think it will resonate with. There are probably parts of this that I've left out. You know, I do have ADD, so I might be all over the place, but I'm trying to remember as much as I can and put it in these videos for you in the hope that it will help somebody. And so stay tuned for part 4 of this series. Assalamu alaikum.